I think I'd just like to take off from what Mr. Raj Gupta had mentioned in his opening remarks. He spoke about, the importance of SMEs in the country on a holistic basis. Now, the SME segment, it contributes about 10% of the GDP. It contributes about 45% of the manufacturing output, say about 35 to 40% of exports. But more importantly, I think it is the largest employer of people after agriculture. So this is something which is actually, I think, very significant in a country like ours, especially when we are talking about, empowering SMEs for 2025. The other important dimension that I would like to touch upon before actually I go forward would be, if you see the growth of SMEs, you will find that actually the SME segment has been the nursery for innovation and entrepreneurship. Yeah, it has been the nursery for innovation and entrepreneurship. So what was being spoken about by Mr. Srinivasan and by Mr. Chauhan about, governance and value creation, I think this would actually give the framework for encouraging that innovation and encouraging that encouraging the innovation and entrepreneurship. I think this is the framework that would actually provide a very strong basis for it. The other thing which I would like to point out is that, see, we're talking about funding and we talk about finance. There are certain basic pillars on which these SMEs are structured. You have finance, you have infrastructure, you have availability of markets, you have availability of skills. So these are obvious factors. But I, representing an insurance company, would also like to touch upon the insurance aspect, particularly the general insurance aspect, and how we can contribute to realizing the vision of empowerment of SMEs in 2025. Now, we live in a world full of risks. You have seen, just a couple of months back, what the cyclone on the eastern coast of the country did to Vizag. Now, it's not that the cyclone has been a unique phenomenon. I think it strikes the country every other year. But this time there is something unique which happened for this cyclone. It is the first time that a storm of this size and intensity has actually hit a densely populated region which has a lot of SME clusters in it. So that is which has caused a lot of damage. So the point of sustainability of SMEs, because they are low capital, they have less resources, the generation of incomes is actually quite limited in most of the cases. So in case of such a event hitting clusters of SMEs or any other kind of business, how do we rebuild? Now you take any kind of a situation, whether such similar kind of events had taken place in this country. You have the J&K floods, you have the Uttarakhand event, where we have seen that the economic losses has been much higher than the insurance losses. That is because the penetration of insurance has been far too low, at 0.7% to GDP, whereas the world average you have about 4% of GDP. I think that is one factor which we need to really look into it. The second part, as I said, that we need to hedge ourselves continuously, and insurance is the tool by which we could hedge ourselves. The SMEs are besotted with a lot of problems. There are a huge lot of problems. So I'd like to focus on just one of them, which I think is quite significant. See, receivables management in the SME segment is a huge issue. They are limited in their capacity to extend credit because the collection process is not efficient. Because of their weaker standing in the entire sort of, gamut of the industrial segment, they tend to be bullied. Collection, although most of the times, they might not convert into bad debts which they have to write off, but the cycle gets extended so much that the burden on carrying debt for that period becomes quite unbearable for them. Here I am talking about, basically the SE and the ME segment, which is actually quite significant here. So there is a product which is there, which is actually it hasn't penetrated. That's called the trade credit insurance product, where you have your receivables covered by this insurance product. Unfortunately, in this country, the market size for this trade credit insurance is very small. The penetration there is about 0.007%. And I believe the estimates are that this could go up to about 0.3%. So once that happens, you have a size, or you have a volume of business which could generate in terms of 100 crores in terms of premium. Now, being from the insurance segment, my primary target is, of course, getting and harnessing more premium. But if you look at the other side, this 100 or 100 odd crores of business premium that you generate extends your coverage multiple times in terms of the receivables which you are protecting. And these receivables are protected not only in your export trade, but it can be also protected in your domestic trade. So I think this is one segment which we really need to have a look at it. But there are certain regulatory restrictions which has prevented from this being penetrated slightly more. And secondly, if you look at the aspect from a bank funding perspective, you will find that if the receivables are backed by some kind of a trade credit insurance, maybe financiers like Mr. Srinivasan or banks like any other bank in this country would have greater comfort in this, because the NPS which you see in the SME segment today, I don't have any data, but I don't know, but I think I would not be incorrect if I say that quite a significant portion of that has been because of the inability to collect debts on time. I think that is a critical factor in this. The other thing which I'd like to talk about is, you see, a point which I had raised in the morning also, when we were talking about, the rural India. See, this time in the census, in the latest census, there was a concept introduced called the census towns. That means, they're basically villages, but which have become bigger and has, adopted or, has started beginning to take the characteristics of an urbanized location. Consumption patterns are changing there. People are, going towards the urbanized kind of a pattern of consumption. You have, mini marts and mini malls coming up there. The demand for consumer goods echo the demand that you see in the urban and the metro locations. But the moot question is, how and why has this happened? I think this has happened because of it being driven by the SME segment in these kind of locations. Now, over the previous year, I think over the previous census, these census towns have increased threefold. If I remember correctly, I think the figure is about from 1,200 to about 4,000 odd census towns have come up. And as an example, I just tell you about Chakan in Maharashtra. It's become an auto hub. It's a village, it's still a village, but it's taken up the characteristics of an urbanized kind of a town. Now this has not been developed, or these census towns are not developing in an organized manner in our country. Now if we can channelize this, and I think it is the SME segment which is going to drive this kind of a growth here. So if we talk about empowering SMEs for 2025, if we are able to achieve that, I think we are empowering the whole country in a much more holistic manner. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Sharma, thank you. The point that you brought up is a very important point to think about, is that SMEs are also the largest employers of the country. Yes, that's a very important point we missed. And therefore, it is our responsibility to give the protection to the SMEs also, because they are actually protecting or generating livelihood for a significant amount of our population. So it's a very important thing that we give a protection to the MSMEs. Now, insurance, of course, is one important factor in giving them that protection. Your other point which you mentioned, that any kind of write-off which is happening, I mean, if there could be backed up or that could be protected by an insurance, that definitely gives them a kind of stability or a kind of a protection, which is a good point to keep in mind. I also think that there had been, I don't exactly remember those rules right now, but under the National MSME Act, which was also a part of the National Manufacturing Act, there had been some protections being given to the MSMEs against any payments to the MSMEs supplying to some big corporates. There are some very stringent clauses being given which gives an MSMEs a protection against the write-off that may have to carry on, or against a delayed payment. So a lot of those rules, but the challenge here is that those rules are very much there, giving them the protection, whether our MSMEs are completely aware of it, and when they are trying to seek a redressal to those problems by invoking any of those rules, whether our systems is giving them that kind of an help to get those redressals. But thank you. A very good point is that insurance can definitely give them a certain
Can I just
cover.
make another point here? I mean, it just reminded of this. While this particular product protects you from collection delays and things like that. Now you take the case of an SME who would like to expand his market. He already has established, he has good connection with certain kinds of buyers. He would like to expand his market beyond. But he does not have the knowledge, or he does not have the the necessary information about credibility or the payment histories of the additional customers that he would like to bring in. This is where this particular product would help him out, because this product is also backed up by obviously when an insurance company would insure against such a default, against a certain kind of a buyer, the insurance company would also do its homework as to the credibility and the payment records. So this could be some kind of a consultancy role or an advisory role to the SMEs, that if you want to expand your market, expand the number of buyers that you have, I think this is a product which could empower them to do it.